edition of our Hartford Power BI user group. We're really loving these lunchtime meetings and hoping that you guys are too. A few housekeeping items to just get started. We do have our chat on the right-hand side of the screen. So if you have any questions come up during the meeting, you can either unmute yourself and ask them, or you can pop it in the chat. And we have a couple of our team members available that can answer that when they come up. And then let's see. All right, for our agenda today, we are going to kick off the hour with our feature presentation for data science for business users, presented by two of our team members, Isaac and Andrew. Next up, we have Anna Mali presenting Power BI's feature updates from July, August, and September. We did leave time for Q&A after each presentation to answer any questions if we missed them during the presentation. And that said, we will move on to our introductions. If anybody from our Talon team, if you guys could start, and then anyone that is in attendance to our PUG, you guys can also unmute and share your name, company or industry that you're working in, and then any recent BI challenge or goal of participating in our group. So anyone from Talon, did you guys want to start?
Sure. My name's Isaac Lean, and I've been with Talon for, I think, about almost 8 months now. And I work as a data architect here, serving several clients under the umbrella of Talon. And yeah, one of the most recent BI challenges to date is we're implementing something similar to our feature presentation. And there is a lot of red tape as far as networking and security permissions for a large organization. And so working through all those has been challenging, but at the end, we'll give them something rewarding. So.
Awesome. Thank you, Isaac.
I could go next. Jared Brown, VP of the Data and Analytics practice here at Talon, and one of the founding members of this user group. And the goal is to kind of share experiences and knowledge with others in the community. So you'll see this kind of recurring theme throughout, but always encourage other people to kind of participate. Feel free to reach out and let us know if you want to present a topic in the future or have questions. We find that the group is very responsive and appreciative.
Thanks, Jared.
Hello, I'm Andrew Kramer. I'm a data scientist here at Talon. I don't do quite as much in Power BI, but I have been providing some support for some of the folks on the project that Liam has been mentioning. Excited to share.
Thanks, Andrew.
I can go. I'm James Airy, also on the data analytics practice here at Talon. I've been doing some architecture stuff with some really cool embedded, handling really custom sort of dashboard solution recently. That's the main thing that we've been having some challenges with. A lot of it is like resizing and making sure things fit cleanly on a page and play nice together, allowing for dynamic filtering and the like. So definitely a fun time. And as usual, I'm just here to hear the latest because I usually don't read it myself.
Well, James, it sounds like you just volunteered for a future topic presentation.
I'll make a note. Thanks, James.
I can go next. Hi, my name is Anamalai. I've been a software consultant in Talon for the last 6 months. Been using a lot of Power BI predominantly in my projects, and I thought something really cool is a lot of the problems I've had with some of the UI and just not being able to produce solutions for certain things are being solved every month through the monthly feature updates, something I'll hope to talk about later in this presentation. So it's good to know that Power BI is constantly releasing a lot of new solutions to fix problems that a lot of people are experiencing.
Awesome. Thank you, Anamalai. All right, I think that's most of our Talon team. Did any of our attendees want to unmute and introduce themselves? No takers?
I can say hi, Gene, if you want.
Okay, yeah.
It's good to see everybody. Michael Thomas, Catchbrook Analytics. Have worked with Talon in the past. I think I could consider myself, Jared, an OG Hartford Pug member. So it's been a little bit since I hopped on, but excited to be on today. I'm a data science consultant in the Hartford area as well.
Awesome.
Yeah, a very recognized member. Yeah, #2 worldwide presentation on the previous topic. So yeah, great stuff.
Thanks, Jared.
Thank you, Michael. All right, last call for anyone else. All right. Well, it looks like we can get started then. I am going to stop sharing, and then Isaac, it is all you.
All right. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
All right, perfect. So, we were presented with this challenge here of really incorporating business users into the data science process, right? Data science to a lot of folks is a complex topic, right? Full of math and full of large sets of data, maybe data that's unstructured, structured. There's all sorts of items in data science that really make the business feel like they're not part of that process. And so what we've tried to do here in this dashboard with this diabetes data set, simple data set from Kaggle, is to really show a demo of how we can help incorporate them into the process of data science and feel like they're part of it, and at least build that trust between the business and the outputs of the models that they're training and the data scientists themselves, right? And this builds a cohesive relationship across the organization, and they feel empowered to be part of that process from the front end to sort of that deployment, which is sort of after this. But either way, what we're trying to do here is really get them involved in it. So I'll begin the demo now here of some of these items. And let me just make this a little bit larger so it's a bit easier. We've created this dashboard, like I said, from the diabetes data set. We have these selections that we can make here as far as some of these simple attributes of data science patients. And what we're going to go ahead and do is select a few of these. And just for reference sake, we've included some of the selections at the top here, even though we know with Power BI, you can sort of hover over this filters on visual and see some of those, but just for reference sake, I have them here at the top as well. So we're going to select a few parameters, maybe diabetes pedigree group, some of these parameters, and then glucose here. So that dwindles down our selection here of participants or patients that we're going to test to see if they may or may not have diabetes through our model. So what we've really incorporated here is this is a Power Automate. So we're really baking in a few different solutions. This is a Power Automate job that will send the data off to our data storage, at least the parameters for it. And then the machine learning job will pick it up and run, actually with this cohort selection that we filtered down to, a training job. And we'll see some results from that later on. So I filtered it, I'm triggering the flow. I can actually view this flow in here inside of Power BI, which this Power Automate visual is new. It's not terribly new, but it is it is new in the past year or two. So this is kind of cool. It sort of really empowers interactivity with your data. So you're not just consuming the data, but you're also able to send off things like a list of parameters or really interact with your data, and sort of segues into that, for lack of a better terms, that sort of that or the Power Apps land. I know that's a bit more interactive and things, but it really kind of dips your toe into that. So on that button click, we're going to initialize a file name. We triggered the flow, and we're going to compose the data. we're going to create a CSV file from the outputs from this previous step. We're going to convert the time zone to UTC. So this goes into our file name. Another step, just a function to replace some of these colons in the time with double dashes. That's for the model to read a little bit easier. And then we drop that file name prefix with the outputs of the file name and the contents into our blob storage. Now, if you come over here into our blob storage and I refresh this, you can see that on 10/27 at 11/10/37, I sent this file, and here's the file name, and the contents of the file here are this string here. So you can see that it's sort of in that CSV format here. We have our parameters for the model. All those things that I selected are now part of the configuration file for the model. And at this point, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I'm going to hand it over to Andrew, going to show behind the scenes of what's happening with the model and a function app we've used to really kick off that model. Then we'll come back and see the results of this model as well.
Thank you, Liam. Thank you, Isaac. Sorry, it always shows your last name first, and I get thrown off every single time. So we are here. We have dropped the CSV in here. Like Isaac just showed, we were able to, I don't think I have the permissions to show, but essentially you've got a CSV file where the columns are each of the columns that were filtered, and the values represented the filters that were therein applied. So the goal here is that since we don't want to be passing around a whole bunch of data back and forth, all we really want to do is get the information so that we can apply it to the data set as a whole. What we've done here is that we've set up a function app that is listening for one of these files to appear. So I'm going to go into the resource group. We've got a function app set up. And within our function app, I've got right here is a little bit of Python code. And essentially what we've done with this function app is that it is listening for anything that we have that was dropped in the cohorts container with any name in what we've defined as our life science demo storage. So as soon as this trigger kicks off, what we get in here in this init file is we are essentially submitting a job to Azure Machine Learning. So Azure Machine Learning is a different tool where you've got basically all of the tools that you would need as a data scientist. You can build you can build different machines and you can run files and you can run jobs and experiments. So essentially what we're doing in this Python file is that we are connecting to the machine learning workspace, and we are running a Python command that we have saved in here. So very simple machine learning model. You know, the performance we're a little bit less interested in as much as the pipeline. So we're going to be submitting that file with the parameters that Isaac just saved. The location of the data, which is in another place that's actually been hard coded, and then also a parameter of where it is going to be saved out. So on the back end, what does this actually look like in the machine learning workspace is we have all sorts of different information in here, but specifically we want to be looking at the jobs that have been run. So we can see that there's a 3-minute job here that was run on October 27th at 11:10. So it took 3 minutes to run. We're able to see some of the performance metrics. So recall and precision are at about 0.66. We've got a history here. We're able to see all of the code that was just used. So if we need to recreate all of this, and the file has also been saved out back into the storage account, which is going to live in here. And we can see all of the stuff over here. So now I'm going to stop sharing, and let's go back to Power BI land and see what's happened over there.
All right. So as you can see here now, we have moved from the select cohort page on over to the cohort output. And normally this would be in real time, where once that output comes to us, what we would do is we take that and put it, say, into Azure SQL Server and create a live connection to that. For this demo right here, we haven't automated those portions yet. So what our hope is, though, is eventually you see that output, so they almost get immediate feedback, again, near real time. And whenever I say near real time, we want the model run, and it depends on the cohort size too, as well, and the model type, right? Depending on the organization that's running this. In our case, it runs rather quickly, but near real time and under 5 to 10 minutes is what we want to see results back. That's the aim of this goal. And in our example here, we have done a confusion matrix, accuracy, recall, and then a ROC curve with a AUC score. And so we can really understand our model outputs, right? And so we can begin to one by one. This is the run that he just did. I may have, should have maybe thrown a few more patients into this. I know the data set's already small, but it kind of does this to a ROC curve when you don't really have enough data. But our model here, accuracy is almost 81%, almost 67% for recall. You can see our confusion matrix. This is really, for a confusion matrix, a good result, especially for this type of analysis where it's diabetes. And what you're trying to do is make sure you correctly identify those who do have diabetes, right? That's what we're looking for. If you incorrectly, or you get some false positives, that's okay, because they can go through the process and then dismiss that they do not have diabetes. But what we really want to capture is those who do have diabetes and accurately predict that number. So what we're trying to do is reduce this number down here. And to Andrew's point, we haven't created this model for performance, for just demo purposes. But as we go through for each one of these runs, even though this is the most recent run, we can see this run here as well. We can see each one of the training runs and by who ran this, and they can get an idea of these cohorts, and maybe they have knowledge in their head of these parameters that they should be training for. And say they came through and they saw a model that they run and they're getting good results out of this. They go back to the data science team for deployment, right? And you could even expand this process out further to select the type of model you want to run against. You can add in even more parameters. You can use more robust data and really build this concept out, even though it's simplified at this point. But again, you can see each one of those outputs, how many patients were a part of that cohort run, and really see in this sort of model, right, when you're trying to accurately predict for diabetes patients, some of the metrics that make sense for this model. Right? So I believe that this process really ties again together, solves that problem of incorporating business users into that process. Sure, there's still more to the data science and afterwards, where you would take one of these models that's trained and go to the deployment phase. But for interactivity between the business and that data science process, I think this is a great solution, and incorporating it in a friendly way for the business to see. So at this point, really, does anybody have any questions about the demo, the process? Any questions for myself or Andrew or the rest of the team?
Isaac, can you go back to the first page and just to help reiterate for folks, the business's ability to interact with data scientists has always been kind of a very for good reasons, iterative process and kind of running through those different simulations, iterations is been kind of time intensive, requires quite a bit of interaction between the groups. So I think this is definitely, at least for this customer that we piloted it for, helped reduce that by giving a little bit of flexibility to the business directly. So does everybody kind of understand, the concept that Isaac was trying to present there, or does anybody have any questions? Feel free to speak up, but it's kind of like a self-service machine learning to a degree.
So Paul Lee here. I work for Yale. First time on this meeting.
Hi, Paul.
Didn't know that actually existed, but I have a question around the data behind it. Is this all SSAS tabular model or?
So that's a good. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, you're the closest to it. Go.
So this is just actually an Excel file, but you could actually hook this up to tabular data. The customer that we're doing this for, we're connecting to an Amazon Redshift server, and we're pulling in the data from there. Actually, we're extracting the data into an Azure environment and then pulling the data in from there into this. And with them, right, we have 5 different selections here. With them, we have about 15 or so, and it's quite a bit more complex. And so you could connect this to some SaaS model or really whatever data you wanted to pull this in here. And then again, you just define your parameters. You send that back through to that blob storage location that you have those parameters. And what's actually happening is that function app, after it listens to it and it kicks off that machine learning process, it will use those parameters to essentially write a SQL query to pull that data in from that Azure environment where we store the data, right? And then it'll pull the data in from there. Because unfortunately, there is a record limit on sending through a Power Automate flow. I think it's about 1,000. So we decided to go with the parameters way instead of the sending like a patient ID, and so simplify the SQL query. But again, too, record limit, and we're doing this for them on around, I think for our POC we did for them, it's around 60,000 records, and it's around lung cancer patients instead of diabetes. So I hope that answers your question, but.
Yeah, no, I so the work that I've done most recently is with SSAS and tabular mode, and I'm looking at this result set that you have here, and it looks very familiar. But to hear that it's all from Excel is kind of surprising.
So let's take a step back. Paul, I don't know. Are you a Power BI user as well? Then yes.
No, I'm
Okay.
actually a data architect. So
okay. So
yeah,
no, it's actually great because Power BI itself is built on the same engine that SSAS Tabular uses. So the code is identical. The Power Query that you'd be familiar with, you could actually copy paste that into Power BI, and behind the the scenes or under the hood, Power BI actually hosts a tabular model. And Microsoft is kind of moving in the direction that I think they're eventually going to have like a button to press to migrate workloads from analysis services tabular to Power BI. Power BI does have additional features, obviously, like the whole report creation engine and everything. But the tabular model was so successful that they are using it as the engine to support Power BI. And you could actually connect Power BI directly to analysis services model, and the DAX just passes through. So it's should be seamless.
Yeah, so I have a question. So if we are using Azure storage, right? I mean, I'm not sure exactly what the source was here completely, like end to end. So if this data is coming from AWS and being stored into Azure, you can utilize the AWS SageMaker or Azure's Machine Learning Studio. It's going to do the work, right? It has an endpoint to consume as a web service. You can pretty much also pull that into a SQL store or SQL database row by row, or any of those Synapse, whatever the ecosystem the team is using. So wouldn't that be advantageous? Meaning you can also connect Power BI there and consume the data in a raw format if we wanted to. But then why not use the machine learning studio? I think, I guess you're trying to present this for more end users who may not use the Azure services or AWS services, machine learning specifically. Is that correct?
Well, I'll let Andrew answer in a second. But under the hood, absolutely. I think the main purpose of bringing Power BI into the equation. Oh, sorry, Andrew. Oh, I think we're getting a little lag on your response. Yeah, so the main point of introducing Power BI into the equation is giving an end user flexibility to pick subsets or cohorts, as Isaac mentioned, that you're going to use to retrain, rerun the model on. So it's kind of like that. It's almost like a self-service machine learning. I mean, don't get me wrong, you're not getting rid of the data scientist who took the time to support all those permutations of features that you're passing through, but it's allowing you to kind of slice and dice the data that you want to pass into the model. So it's more a mechanism to allow that flexibility. It's still using exactly what you described under the hood. I don't know, Andrew, I see your back. Do you want to?
Yeah, so the idea is you've got all of these business users or scientists or whatever with all of the domain knowledge. And the domain knowledge, but they might not know how to build a custom machine learning model, or in this case is all about clinical trials. So you would want to be doing a lot of work on, looking at different specific cohorts. So you know all about this problem, you know all about diabetes, et cetera, but you don't know a lick of Python. This is going to empower you to run experiments on these cohorts without having to execute any Python commands or anything like that. And it's just kind of giving power to the business user rather than just the data scientist. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and maybe an example will help too for others that may, still have some questions. I forget, what did we say? This was diabetes. So maybe as a subject matter expert in the realm of diabetes, for instance that you want to eliminate those that are under 30 from the machine learning because maybe they're less susceptible. Whatever the case may be, you could bring some of that intelligence that you have, or perhaps a theory, and kind of retrain the model on particular groups that you're targeting or whatever the case may be. And sure, you could call up the data scientist and say, well, let's retrain the model. I want to remove this age band or whatever, but that's that's a very manual process and it consumes a lot of time. The idea here was to allow that kind of ad hoc, retraining to happen with a couple clicks and, to do so very repetitively.
Well, and yeah, the baked in machine learning too only supports that real-time endpoint for deployed models, right? This actually puts you front and center in the training process, right? That's the biggest part here. We're not just throwing inference data at it and trying to get some results back on an already trained model. We're trying to be part of that process and empower them to be part of the actual training process and start hypothesizing versus, oh, here's what the model gives me back.
Right. Great point, Isaac. Yeah, you wait a matter of seconds for that round trip of the data, especially if you're using direct query to one of the repositories that support it, not having to say, okay, I'll come back tomorrow and refresh my report. It's making it, more instantaneous. I mean, as long as it takes to run the model too. It depends how complex it is, but hopefully not, something you have to wait until the next day for. I mean, I guess that's another advantage of Azure, right? You have the scale of the compute that you can kind of parallelize and run things more efficiently, but.
Correct. Is there any other questions, or were you going to show some stuff on this side here still, Jared, on this selection pane, or did you already?
Oh no, I just wanted to bring that up again for reference so people could kind of see how you can like slice and dice and then say, go ahead and run my machine learning simulation, and then it's a great presentation, guys. If nobody else has any other questions. Round of applause for you.
Thank you. All right, I will stop sharing my screen then and hand it off.
Okay, I can share my screen now. How's the screen looking? Can everyone see it?
Yes.
Yep.
Perfect. Hi everyone, so I'm Annamalai, and today I'll be talking about some of the latest feature updates for Power BI. So I've broken this down into two different sections. One is for July and one is for August and September. I'm going to go through surface level for some of these features first, and then maybe focus on a couple in some more detail so that I can give some insights into how exactly it can be useful for users to use. So firstly, we have error bars that are now finally generally available. And these are just with data labels on your values, and you can actually get values that represent the upper and lower bounds directly on the visual. These can be just enabled simply in your formatting pane and also allow the regular customization that you're used to with a lot of these other features. In terms of the filled map for Azure Maps visual, you now have a feature that helps you present variations or patterns across different geographical regions. And just a key step to making sure that this would work is to ensure that the Azure Maps preview is enabled and also gather a set of locations that the user would want to visualize. And then you would be able to see all the distinct shapes being drawn across your map. For the composite models on the Power BI datasets and analysis, this is still a preview feature. So it's not 100% generally available yet, but it's out on its testing process. And it's basically one that allows you to create a composite model that allows you to set different dynamic mQuery parameters. And this will help users use filters and slicers to set values for these mQueries for further analysis. And this could prove to be a very useful tool. The scorecards now include metric visuals. This is a pretty big one because you can now integrate just individual metrics in terms of instead of the entire scorecard and create these report pages alongside other visuals in relevance to the whole report. There's a new function called the network days function. This is particularly useful. This is essentially a function that when you pass in an argument of two dates, it returns the total number of working days that have passed between those two arguments. So for example, if you were to input October 1st and October 30th, it would return 20. And on top of that, you're actually able to add a third optional parameter, which is to include optional holidays that a workplace might include, for example. And this could further help make this more complex. If you want to eliminate some days, for example, if you have 2 days off or every Friday off or something, it would give 16 days instead of 20. We also have the support for multi-role RLS. This is particularly useful because a model owner can now help a user occupy multiple different RLS roles without the error no longer occurring. And this is also a preview feature, so Power BI is still doing some more testing, so we got to hang tight for that one before it's completely released. And another big one for the month of July was connecting to Datamarts. Power BI Datamart is a recently added component that is a combination of data flow, Azure SQL database, and Dataset. And it functions more like a container around these components of Power BI. And this is something I'll go into more detail in a minute. And lastly, in terms of the service, there's a few data hub improvements where you can see the data preview and export data from a data set with just a couple of clicks, unlike previously. So that's a pretty useful feature as well. So for the updated error bars, as you can see, just as an example, you're now able to see these error bars based on the upper, lower bound, and you can also format it by percentage, percentile, or standard deviation, which gives you a lot more flexibility in terms of the bounds you want to show for different data points, and also have formatting. You can change it on color if it's higher or lower than certain predictions and different conditional formatting. So that's very, very useful. And in terms of the data mart, I'll go into a little more detail. So just for an overview, the data flow is a data transformation layer in your Power BI implementation, and this helps you extract data sources, transform it, and load it into the CDM. And this helps solve the problem of having multiple versions of the same tables in your ETL layer. The data set is a layer of all the calculations and modeling, and that's where that takes place. and it'll help get the data from the data flow and build an in-memory data model using Power BI. And this is where you'll use a lot of your DAX and your modeling skills. So Datamart essentially has everything combined into it with the additional Azure SQL database component. So you have a unified web UI that helps you build and manage all these components. So this image over here shows the overall multi-developer architecture that Power BI now enables below. And although this is a very nice feature that Power BI has added, it's still not completely replacing data flow, because you can still you can build and utilize data flows without the presence of a BI solution, while Datamart's main use case is for building BI solutions. And if your use cases is just integrate tables in a storage and reuse in further applications, data flow might still be a better option. The same goes for Dataset being replaced, where although the UI and data might be more intuitive, it may be very overkill for very simple use cases. So overall, Datamart definitely ensures easier and faster implementation after overcoming the initial learning curve, such as key advantages are simpler data maintenance and also quicker to access insights.
So before you move on from that one, AG, I don't know if anybody's looked at Datamarts yet. I mean, it's a very exciting feature. Mac users are like thrilled, because in some cases it lets you develop data sets, including relationships, DAX measures, without using Power BI Desktop. But there are certain elements that it's taking and pushing into this kind of presentation layer that in some cases maybe should be part of a traditional ETL process. So to AG's point, it's a pretty amazing feature. And the incorporation of an Azure SQL database in the mix, so you could actually connect to the data that you modeled in Power BI, is really exciting. But I think there's certain areas where it's you proceed with caution. It doesn't necessarily replace some of the traditional things that we would do from an ETL and data preparation perspective. But I can pretty much guarantee there's going to be a future topic that gets into this feature in a lot more detail. So stay tuned.
So some of the key features in August and September. In terms of conditional formatting for data labels, the conditional formatting labels were previously only applied on full aggregate of the field across the full visual, as opposed to an individual point. However, Power BI has realized that this isn't necessarily intuitive for a lot of users, so they now enable users to use conditional formatting in a manner that's more useful. So this means that different data points can be formatted on different conditions that you provide. For example, a line chart could highlight red for sales being low and green for sales being high for each given month in separate conditions. A small new update for this is the select sensitivity label. This is a time-saving feature that allows creators to directly set a sensitivity label from the save flow. Data loss prevention policy. This is a pretty interesting one, where the policies now enable you to control sensitive information managed in your Power BI tenant, as well as comply to your local governmental or industry regulations, such as, I guess it's not relevant to many people here maybe, but like the European Union's General Data Protection Regulation. So this allows users now to provide feedback on these policy rules. So if you see a specific data column on your Power BI report, that is incorrectly being scrutinized or breaking a certain DLP policy, you're now able to report or override this issue as long as you have a valid reason. Some more similar metric visual updates, just like they were in July, and also mobile formatting options. So now it's a lot more optimized when you have creating a mobile canvas. So you can change these format settings that best suit that as well. And in terms of September, we have the hierarchical axis by default. Before this update, you actually had to format the chart with a multi-step process, but now you're able to do it in a single step. For translations support for composite models, this is a preview function, but this is actually pretty interesting. Translations are now enabled to show tables and columns in your data set in the language the user prefers. Up till now, if the source had these translations defined, they would be ignored when you build the composite table. So now any translations that you define in your source can now be exposed in the composite model. so that the column names and such will be translated to any language that the user prefers. And in terms of service, this is a big one. So the cross-tenant dataset sharing is now a preview feature. And I'll dive into more detail in this in a minute. And some other small features are it's now possible to export paginated reports with all Power BI datasets as a data source when the caller is a service principal. So that's a pretty useful one. So just an example to reiterate some of the conditional formatting I was talking about, where you're able to set individual conditions for different data points. So now cross-tenant dataset sharing. So now what exactly, this is an exciting capability that allows customers to share their Power BI datasets with external users in a way that allows these external users to access the datasets in their own Power BI tenant. So this is a form of in-place sharing, meaning that from their own tenant, consumers can now discover and connect to live data with providers. They can then work with these shared data sets in their own tenant and create composite models by meshing the shared data sets with their own internal data. And then this composite model can also be published on their service for reporting purposes. So when an external data set is being shared, to initiate the dataset sharing with external users, the specified dataset owners have to go to the settings to the specific dataset and enable the option over there. And this allows the user to provide granular control over which datasets can and cannot be shared externally. Along with enabling cross-tenant dataset sharing, we also Power BI is also making it easy to find reports, datasets, folders, dashboards, metrics, and etc. With an external user. So when you log into your Power BI service, you can actually see a new tab on your homepage called From External Organizations, and this will list all the artifacts shared with you by your external tenants. And this experience just allows users to simply filter down and help find content that you need quickly. Key things to note though, security risks. If you use an in-place dataset sharing, data might move into another region if the consumer and provider tenants are located in different regions. This is because data is cached on the consumer tenant to build composite models and reports on top of shared data. So regardless, storage and computation for shared datasets remains within the provider tenant. So this may potentially impact certain regional boundary rules and compliances and etc. And also workplace with other data sets may get into the wrong hands if not toggled correctly. So this is something, again, that users have to provide with caution. An example for this is if you had COVID data, for example, for only one region to show in Massachusetts, New York, and Maine, basically the Northeast, we need to ensure that before enabling it, you have to apply RLS so that the relevant users can and can't see the data. In the tenant settings is off by default, so you have to opt into using it. And this is not necessarily the only way to share your data. There's always alternatives, such as like a SQL Server instance, for example, to share data with your clients. And
So
yeah,
I actually have a question around this. So my main work, let's just call it, is around FQHCs, right? And I have 4 different FQHCs that I'm providing, let's say, different views to enable them to retrieve data that they're after. So this sounds very much like something similar, but how do you define, say, a report that would be filtered on, we use Epic, so it's service area ID. So if I have 4 different clients, let's call them, that have different service area IDs, how would I go about filtering that data?
So filtering in order to share the data, the subset of the data to those individuals in a data set or in a report? Or both?
I think
both.
Well, probably both, but.
Yeah, so the data set, I guess there's a couple ways you could do it. I mean, you could certainly create different data sets for each of the individuals, but I mean, row level security is one approach that could be implemented in terms of data set. So no matter who's connecting, it can validate or authenticate who that person is, check against one of the row level security policies, and only give them access to the data that they're supposed to see. some organizations don't want to even have the data co-located in a single data set that multiple people are connecting to, in which case they may opt to break the data into different data sets. But to AG's point, this feature does make me a little, I won't say nervous per se, because obviously if you approach it with all the security safeguards in place to make sure that there isn't some kind of unexpected exfiltration, it is certainly a safe option. But I do worry that organizations may turn this on, not knowing what the implications are for data sharing, and may not put those safeguards in place, right?
No, I definitely agree.
Yeah, it's yeah. So row level security, the nice thing about row level security for internal users, there's a couple ways that you could implement it, and you can have some kind of governing body that's regulating. But if you start giving people access to share, forget even externally, internally, there is that risk. A lot of times we suggest turning sharing off and having people put in a specific request for access so that it could be put into a security group as opposed to granting access to individuals directly. So there's certain use cases where this is great, especially as the world tries to get closer to kind of a data mesh architecture. But there's a lot of then burden or requirements put on the individuals to keep the data cleansed and certified, and also to consider those security implications. So
I definitely agree.
Awesome. And yeah, so I guess some new potential features that we will talk about in the future in October and dive into more detail. One particular feature that caught my eye was actually the Azure DevOps extension that contains all the API operations available today for deployment pipelines. So now a user would be able to create and edit pipelines, assign workspaces, and also add users to a specific pipeline and workspace. So it allows the user to basically manage deployments across different stages in the pipeline, and that could be a very interesting and useful feature going ahead. But that's all I have for the updates. Yeah, now if anyone has any questions, I'm sure the team can help answer them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sid, I see you threw in the chat an article about the White House pushing for more EU-like policies in terms of data sharing. I don't know, the full scope of that.
It's not even EU-like. That there's a commitment to adopt a lot of the data privacy laws.
Right.
So this is so particularly, and if anybody's interested, would happy to field questions or share my email and chat, and people want to put. But this is definitely a big thing we're facing with our public health clients and in public health scenarios, both data sharing, sharing across local entities, federal entities, anything like that. So there's lots of options, but also lots of regulations coming up. And so, as Jared said, the beauty, the dangerous opportunity is what the tech lets us do, and the dangerous opportunity is what the tech lets us do. So how do we put the right safeguards in place so that we don't hurt ourselves with the options? Something fun that we're walking a state through right now.
Yeah, that's definitely great info. Paul, I think back to your question. I'm going to put a link in to the cross organization sharing of data, and I'm just quoting part where it talks about how the RLS does remain honored even when you're sharing outside of the organization. So
yeah, I was going to ask Jared.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, but to Paul's question, and this is, I'm going to admit my ignorance here, but for row-level security, that is like cross-tenant, right? Cross ADS, the Active Directory groups, right? So
Yeah, well,
that's
so
B2B invites and things like that. Like,
exactly. Yes. This
Okay.
this feature uses B2B, Azure Active Directory B2B, which for those that aren't aware, your organization may have to turn this on, but what it allows you to do is invite someone that's part of another organization to be a guest in your Azure Active Directory. So they still have to authenticate. You still know who they are. You could still put them in different security groups. So it uses that that kind of infrastructure that's already in place. There are other ways in Power BI to share reports anonymously. We don't encourage that except in very specific, circumstances. And if you do allow that, having somebody turn, making it available only to a subset of users and to have a process around it. So
one of the challenges that we face is we have an organization with 100 people that want to do reporting, and they don't want to create 100 different Active Directory accounts. So we create a SQL account, and we grant that SQL account access to very specific tables and whatnot. So that's a bit of challenge that we're facing. But in addition, not only is it by service area, it's also by patient, right? So if this patient is not part of their, let's say, patient list, right, they're not going to see those patients. So
right.
how do you filter, and is
So-
it capable of filtering on multiple different points?
Yes. So that's a great
and
question.
Jared, I was going to say one quick thing for consideration in any answer there is particularly with healthcare data, it is critical that we all move towards logging who's accessed what and when. And so, yes, I understand the pain in like managing individual accounts, but there's a lot we can do in group policies there. But just understand the danger or the risk that y'all are opening up by not knowing who, by using a SQL account, not knowing who's looking at what data.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So
not ideal, that's for sure.
Yeah, and there's ways to achieve both. So if you're really, you could automate the creation of accounts, but if the concern is that you don't want to have those many accounts in yet another directory, there's something called Power BI Embedded, where you can effectively wrap a Power BI report in an application and use whatever you want people to log in to that portal, using. Say you have some existing LDAP or other existing portal that you want to leverage. You can make it the application's responsibility to grab that person's credential and pass that through when it connects to the underlying report. So you do kind of maintain that record of who is connecting, and you can then control what they have access to. It does mean having to build or slightly enhance maybe an existing application around those reports, but then you could license that reporting capacity as a more like a compute power model, where you say pay $750 a month for maybe it's 1,000 users, I don't know, as opposed to having to license individual people. So that's one technique we've used in the past. The other thing, to Sid's point, you do have the ability to audit. Power BI does have events. If you're doing the embedded route, you may have to add some of your own. Power BI does have the events capability to audit events, such as who viewed what report. We've had some organizations who wanted to take a step further and see, for instance, hey, person XYZ is looking at these political figures or celebrity details in like a healthcare scenario, and you want to take action. So we've gone a step further and did some customizations on the Power BI side that would let us know if people were looking at other individual people that maybe they shouldn't because they weren't a specific patient or whatever the case may be. And sometimes the
and you
threat.
get the same thing in
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, yeah, you get the same thing in financial services situations as well. Like, you know, if I cannot look up, say, like my ex-wife's account or something like that. If I was like the scenario, you want to make sure you're not, you know, abusing those privileges. And so Paul, in that scenario, I'd say, you know, for y'all, I would definitely highly encourage. You can get, to Jared's point, get that simplicity in, you know, like the quote unquote single account, by, you know, looking at how y'all might use Active Directory users and groups to drive access, so that you can also get the right, you know, simplify, just like, hey, we got onboarded 5 new people, we add them to the group. Well, then the group has access to the data. And as long as you're a member of the group and you drive and you have to change somebody out, you change them out. But you know, the not only, I'd encourage you to look at that risk you have with not being able to say who's access to data. But what happens if somebody now is no longer there? You have a static login, and that's not tied to, say, their AD, and that poses a challenge as well when you onboard or offboard people.
Yep. So great topic, and thanks for bringing that up. Anybody have any other questions about some of the things that AG presented? And I guess, or any other questions in general. And I guess maybe while we wait, you know, this was AG's first time presenting at the user group, so great job. Definitely, let's give him a round of applause.
Yay, AG.
Yeah, good job.
Good job, man.
Thank you.
For the question in the chat, we are going to be sending up a follow-up email tomorrow, so that we'll have a link to the recording and then a link to all of our presenters' LinkedIn accounts. And then you can always reply directly to the email as well, and we can get it to the right person. Does anybody else have any final questions? All right, well, thank you everyone for coming. And as we mentioned a few times, the recording will be sent out tomorrow. You will see a link in this chat pretty soon, but it is only available to those internal. So stay tuned for the link tomorrow, and have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.